Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you to become that confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. Today's guest is Dionne Payn, and let me tell you about Dionne. Dionne is a trailblazer in ethical property investment and passionate advocate for women's financial empowerment. As the founder and CEO of Women for Homes, she has over a decade in the property industry, including creative, affordable, important word there, housing projects, and raising over $45 million for projects that deliver affordable, sustainable, and inclusive homes. With a strong academic background, including a PhD in natural products chemistry and hands-on experience in managing a range of property development, she has generated returns for investors at the same time, contributing significantly to addressing the issues of housing affordability. At the heart of Dionne's work is Women for Homes, a bold initiative with the mission to inspire 1 million women to invest $5,000 each to end homelessness by 2030. By creating a platform where financial empowerment meets social impact, Women for Homes is designed to unlock transformative investment opportunities that finance affordability housing projects. Recent developments, including homes tailored for women over 55, the fastest growing demographic facing homelessness, demonstrates her commitment to providing practical, sustainable solutions to one of the society's most pressing challenges. We're going to talk about breaking the barriers, overcoming financial challenges for women. Please join me in welcoming my guest, Dionne Payn. Dionne, such an important topic, when you go almost anywhere today, you see homelessness. And it's not, it's not just people that have come from the war, veterans. It's not people who just are lazy and they can't make ends meet. It's families and young people and old people. And as you said, we have a whole lot of baby boomers out there that are facing uncertainty about whether or not they'll be able to keep the home they have and afford what is there for them. So I'm so impressed with your mission and was one of the big reasons why I wanted to have you on the podcast today.
Well, Vicki, thank you. I'm really delighted to be here. And you're right, it is such an important topic. And so I'm really looking forward to unpacking this with you and your audience.
So before we get started with the very important questions, I have two questions that are important, I think, to the audience. And that's first, tell everybody, where do you live? Where do you call home right now?
Oh, okay. So right now I call home a little town in Australia called Mullumbimby. And it is on the east coast of Australia. It is 2 hours south of Brisbane and 9 hours north of Sydney.
Oh my goodness. One of my places on my bucket list is Australia. I will get there.
It's a beautiful place to be, and I arrived here 20 years ago from the UK, and I just couldn't believe it. It was just the most beautiful place that I've ever seen in my whole entire life, and I've been to some beautiful places. But it's the sort of main area that people might recognise is a place called Byron Bay, which is an old hippie town. There were lots of surfers here. Before the surfers came, there were lots of farmers. So it's a really, and before then, there were the indigenous people of this, of this that we walk on. So it's a very special place. It's got a very beautiful energy here. And what tends to happen is that people get called here. They sort of arrive here, and then, the magic works on them. And some of them stay, like myself, and some of them leave. But I think everybody that comes here is touched in some way by the beauty and the specialness of this land.
Fantastic. So we talked about where you are today and what you're doing, and a little bit about your credentials, but I always love for you to tell your story of really what led you to do what you're doing today, to really make this your mission, your passion.
Yeah, I think a good place to start is how I grew up and what I was brought up into. So my family are Pentecostal Christians, and so that was a big part of my life growing up. And there were some things that I still agree with. There are some things that I don't. But one of the biggest things that's been a huge factor in my life is just the desire to be of service, and the belief in something bigger. And I mean, that desire to be of service has taken me down some really interesting paths. And where I've got to right now is that, yes, it's good to be of service, but first of all, you've got to be able to, my experience has been, I've got to be able to fill my own tank. And then when I'm overflowing, I can give. That's been a very hard lesson, because before I was trying to give from not having very much, and that was always really hard. But that desire to be of service, when I've ignored that, I felt that I've kind of been taken off track, and I haven't necessarily enjoyed who I've become in that process. So my journey from there to here was really, I did all the right things. My family were immigrant to the UK. As kids, it was drummed into us, you've got to work harder than everybody else. Nobody's going to give you a break, and you've just got to you've got to make it yourself, kind of thing. So that was the service ethic and the hard work ethic.
Yeah.
The big parts of my life. And from that, I like I said, I did all the right things. I went to uni, I got my education, I got a PhD, and the PhD was fantastic. I have absolutely no regrets about doing it. It was a real passion project for me. I grew so much in that. But when I came out of that, I had a choice to make. Was I going to raise a family, because I was in my early 30s, or was I going to go headlong into this career, which actually I'd realised that towards the end of my studies was not what I thought it was going to be anyway. So I made the decision to take a break, have children, and then figure out what was going to come next. And having children was like the best thing that I could have done.
I agree.
It was just fantastic, and I loved that time. I remember when my daughter was born, because she was due to arrive 10 weeks after I'd submitted my thesis. She was actually a little bit later than that. Yeah.
I can't imagine doing a thesis and being 9 months pregnant. Go girl.
It was a very interesting time, but by the time that she arrived, I had this little human. And it was like I was on holiday. And she was a dream, and she still is. She's 15 now, but she was a dream, and I just had that wonderful connecting time. And actually, an important part of my story, which I don't think I've shared with many people, is that was the journey from my head to my heart. Because up until then, I've been very academic, and then all of a sudden, I had this little human to look after. And Yeah, it was beautiful. So that all of these experiences have changed me in some way. But yeah, just having this human, and then the practical aspects of, okay, well, I've got children now, and we're a family. My husband was working. We've got a single income. How are we actually going to make this work? Because it's
Yeah.
being choosing to stay home with the children is not an easy decision to make. When you take into account the cost of living, and we were ambitious and we wanted to buy a property and really set ourselves up for life. And I realized pretty quickly that that staying home with my children, being on one income, was not going to set us up financially. But I didn't want to not have that time. So I just had to get creative, and that was where I decided to learn about property. And I just remember there was a house that we missed out on, that it was somewhere where I'd actually had a home birth with my second child, and I thought there might be a really creative way to purchase that property, but all of the creative ways that we knew of didn't work for the vendor at that time. So I just remember just feeling really like, oh, like I can't, how am I going to get ahead? This is just so hard. And I just remember vowing to myself at that time that I was just going to figure out a way, like I was going to learn how to play the game of property. I might have even said if it kills me. But I was going to I was just going to learn how to play this game so I could get what I wanted, and that was the motivation. So we did a property development course. It was a mentoring, with the small amount of money that we had. And the beautiful thing about that was that we found a joint venture partner. So he had he had money, but not the time to be able to invest. And we had the time, but not the money to invest. So we partnered. And that was my first experience of, if I don't have something, I can work with somebody that does.
That's exactly right.
Liberating. Yeah. So that's what we did, and we did a few small projects, and there were renovations, subdivisions, where we got an old house. Either there was two houses, like a house and a studio, and we were able to renovate both, and then do the paperwork to sell them separately. Or it was a main house with a big piece of land that we could again get the paperwork done to be able to sell the land separately, so somebody else could go and build the house. And we did that a few times, and that was just brilliant. And I remember the first time, and getting this check, and it was more money than I'd ever had in my life in one hit.
Yeah.
This is brilliant.
Oh.
So that's where we started, and then I got more ambitious and decided that I was going to go for something bigger, because I had the skills by then to be able to do a financial feasibility, look at the business case, just go, okay, well, this can work. And I remember I found this piece of land. In fact, it was opposite the shopping centre that I used to go to get our lunch when we were renovating the other place. And there was this piece of land, and it had a for sale sign there for ages. And I was like, oh, somebody's got to be able to do something with that. So I ran the numbers, and I realised that I couldn't make it work at the price it was advertised, but I could make it work if I got it for $100,000 less. So I just made the offer, and they accepted. I was like,
You went, yay.
okay, now we're on. And then I had to find other joint venture partners, because it was bigger than the capacity for the joint venture partner that we had. But then it all started moving, and that was quite amazing. And I also remember the time that because it was something bigger than what I'd done before, I knew that where I'd been and what was working for me here wasn't going to work for me here. So I needed a bit of an upgrade, sort of in mindset. So I did a personal development course. So it was a weekend. And I remember, sort of I'd put all this work into it, and I'd done all the right things, but it just wasn't clicking. And so I did this personal development course, and I realized that I had all of these limiting beliefs. And I was like, okay, so, just being able to uncover those in this course was amazing. And then the next week, it all fell into place. And I was like, oh my God. And the cool thing about it was that it was an affordable housing project. So there were 14 one-bedroom townhouses. There was just the bare land. The development approval had already been approved by council. So we then just had to go and build it. That's what I thought. We just have to go and build it. Turns out that's a whole different ballgame, and it's actually it was actually quite difficult, and because it was such a step up from what I'd done before, there was no middle ground. So, you know, over the course of that project, I realised that I'd hired the wrong builder. I'd actually got in with the wrong joint venture partners. There wasn't that values alignment. But what did work was that we sold 14 one-bedroom townhouses for an average price of 350,000 in an area where the median house price was 600,000. And my very first client, the very first sale, was to a friend of mine who had a very small inheritance from her father. I would not have been able to find anything in the area had she not had that. So if I was going to do that project again now, I would just, you know, it would be so easy because, you know, just finding the land and getting all of that done, I would just make it my focus to go and find the land and then just replicate. I've moved on, I have to say, but yeah, we could have sold that 10 times over. Now you know, it'd be very hard to make the numbers work because land prices have risen and construction costs have risen, that sort of thing. But yeah, like it was the most painful because of what I mentioned before with the joint venture partner and builder. But it was the most precious experience of my life, other than my children, because I learned so much, and that it just activated for me. I can make money and I can be of service. And that just cemented it. And so I spent a few years after that. I feel like I was in the wilderness a little bit. I was like, well, I had this success, but it came at a cost. It came at a cost of my mental health. I went into a bit of a depression after that. So, you know, it was like I made this vow of I'm going to learn how to play the game of property. But how do I do that in a way that's in integrity with who I am? I realised that you know, I got quite attached to the idea of being a developer and the power of being a developer, but I was really playing a man's game and trying to just
be like a man instead of using women's
yeah. So you know, like I said, you know, in the wilderness for a few years until I found a beautiful man who is a developer. And we decided again to join forces. So all the way through my development career, it was really easy for me to find joint venture partners and investors. So I just said, okay, well, I will do that for you. You do the development. He had 30 years of experience, and I was like, I can trust you. And you know, it was a beautiful collaboration.
You could tell the relationship was a good synergy, right?
Exactly. So that was a good experience of finding the right partner. So I raised money for him, and then I thought, oh, okay, this makes sense to me to be working with developers who I know are doing the right things. He was all about affordable housing as well and sustainable housing. We've worked together on a few projects, and I've been able to have some input into some of the things that he can do to increase the sustainability or increase the affordability of it. So it's a really beautiful partnership. But I realized that, you know, while that was great, this could go to a whole new level. So that's what I did. I started my business, High Impact Property Investments. That business partner was involved in that for a little while before we parted ways, and very amicably, and we still work together now. But I just needed to, rather than just focus on one, I needed to scale that impact. And then, so I've been doing that for about 4 years, and I've raised money for property developers, all in that, you know, sort of that genuine impact space, because that's something that's really important to me. And then it was the end of last year where I just kept getting these messages of stop resisting, and, you know, what you resist persists. And I'm like, I don't know why I'm persisting. I'm, you know, really going for it. But what came for me was that it's now time to make this more accessible. Because when I raise capital for developers, I'm going to high net worth individuals, philanthropic organisations, funds management companies, and it's all you know, it's all about those with high net worth, which is amazing, and I'm not knocking it. But I just feel that if we want to solve this problem of homelessness, this is an everybody problem. This is not
That's right.
And so how do we get everybody involved? And when I was looking at, well, what are the reasons that, particularly for women, like the women over a certain age, that homelessness is increasing? And I looked at the gender pay gap. I looked at the gender superannuation gap or retirement funds gap. I looked at, you know, the sort of disparity that happens when women enter the workforce and when they take time out to raise children. I looked at all of it and I was like, oh, this is really important to address this, because I can't just have a product that's, okay, women come and invest, without just going, well, these are all of the reasons that we as women are financially vulnerable. And until you have awareness of that, you're just not going to change it. Some women are lucky and they just, breeze through this. But what I found is that it does not matter what your income level is. A lot of women still have that sort of capability of being financially vulnerable. So even I'll give an example. A woman who I know is in sort of part of my networks. She had an ex-partner that was very high up, very well paid. I think she was very successful in her own right as well. But when they separated, he said, "Okay, you've got the house. I'll take the super. That's in the superannuation retirement fund." But she had no money in which to renovate the house, and she couldn't get a loan to be able to renovate the house to get the best price to be able to sell it. So there's all sorts of ways that we can be financially vulnerable. And so I really wanted to address that. And I remember when I was thinking of Women for Homes and thinking, okay, well, how's it going to be? And I just kept getting this message of, you need to start a podcast. I went, no, I don't want to start a podcast. It's going to be so much work. I was like, okay, I'll start a podcast. And I just found a way to do it in a very structured way, in a very streamlined way. And basically, I just get to chat, sit on the sofa and chat.
That's exactly.
To women. And it's really easy.
I know. It's the best thing I've done for a long time. I love doing this.
Yeah.
So what are the most systematic challenges that women face when they're trying to be financially stable, and what actionable steps can they take to overcome obstacles that just keep coming at them as they go?
Look, I'll illustrate that with an example of a friend of mine. So she moved many times. So back in 2022, we had a flood, and it was a catastrophic flood in our area. And where I live is called the Northern Rivers. That's the sort of broad name for it. There's a lot of rivers here.
I guess so.
There was it was just there was a big storm cell that was over the ocean. There were king tides, so really big tides. There'd been a lot of rain, and the ground was saturated. So all of this, the perfect storm. And it meant that just our local region was devastated. So low-lying properties were flooded, properties that were high in the hinterland, because there was so much rain, they were just subjected to landslides. So roads were. It was catastrophic. And so my friend moved. I think she said it was 24 times. It was at least 18 times over that period, because the house where she had lived and she'd rented was just damaged. She couldn't live there. So she went from couch surfing to staying in hostels to eventually the local council and the state government created this pod village where residents that were flood affected could live. But the challenging thing about that was that there were a lot of people with mental health issues in there as well. So it wasn't really thought through. The pods were put up, but it wasn't really thought through as to the mix, the demographic mix there. So for her and other women that were in those pod villages, they were just subjected to lots of noise, lots of arguments, they didn't feel safe. The good thing about that, though, was not them not feeling safe, but the good thing about the pod village was that it was rent-free for a period of 2 years. So my friend worked 2 or maybe even 3 jobs to save the money for a deposit for a home. And the government at the time said they did what was called a shared equity scheme. There were 10,000 places for that particular year. And they said that, and this was to address housing affordability. So they said, okay, well, for anybody that's single There's a cap of $90,000. For anybody that's in a couple, there's a cap of $120,000. So that was the maximum earning that they could have. And so my friend just saved like a trooper. She was just amazing. And I remember her telling me, and I was like, that is incredible. And when it actually came, she found a home. When it actually came time to, put down the deposit and apply for this government funding, and she did that through a bank, she was $2,000 over in what she had earned, and used they refused the loan and the scheme, so she couldn't buy it. And I mean, she was just saying, look, I'm like this $2,000.
I'll give it away.
Yes, she was going to give it back. It was we have an organisation over here called Centrelink, which is a government organisation. She was like, I'll just give it back. But the wheels in government departments move so slowly that she just lost that property. And she did all the right things. She knew the barriers that were there, and she as a single parent, and as a single parent whose partner was not contributing, she really understood the barriers that were there. And it's like banks will not give single women a loan if they're not earning a certain amount. And so this dear girl was working, sort of many hours of the day, probably 12 hours a day, sacrificing the quality of life with her child for a brief period. She had a goal, but sacrificing her own, sort of time to have downtime, her mental health, and living in a situation that was not ideal because of all of the violence that I mentioned before. She wasn't physically attacked herself, but she was just living around it. And
right, just you don't feel safe.
She didn't feel safe.
And
that comes with its own toll on its mental health. And so that was her story. She missed out on a property, and now she knows that she's priced out of the housing market. So that's like, what are we talking about there? We're talking about climate change and sort of the climate refugees. We're talking about banks not being flexible, governments not being flexible, even when they say, okay, well, we're going to do this great scheme. That $2,000, there was just no flexibility to
no gray area.
And then the market moves so quickly that she's now priced out. So often people will say, oh, well, why don't you just move to somewhere cheaper? But when you've built a network and a community around you in one location, a support system, and all of her family are here. So when she's built that support system, and then to just move away from that, and she's already a single parent, those are some of the barriers that we're facing there. And that's not an isolated story either. I mean, that's quite an extreme example, but it's not an isolated story. And I know women that will sleep in their cars, and then they're getting moved on but there's just nowhere for them to rent. And again, it's that same question of, well, where do you go when your community is here? Yes, you can start over again, but it's hard to start over again when you're over a certain age. So, and then, we talk about the gender pay gap, and taking time out of the workforce to have children, which is actually one of the most important things that you can be doing as a woman, I think, is not adequately compensated. It's just not. And even to the point of, you take time out of the workforce, it's not just the money that you don't have then, it's the money that you don't have because it's not being put into your superannuation or retirement account. So there's that double whammy. And then, in terms of the savings that we have as women, it's less than what a man would have in sort of being able to have that greater earning capacity. So those are some of the systemic barriers that women face. And then how can you overcome them? Awareness. So I'll give you an example, a beautiful example, actually. On the podcast, I interviewed a lady called Wendy Alexander, and she's a career coach. And she was talking about negotiation is one of the best things that you can do to get a salary that you deserve. And it all starts with valuing yourself and being prepared to negotiate, and not negotiating from bluff and bluster, negotiating from a place of, well, I've done the work to understand what my value is. I've done the work to understand what the wage range is and what other people are getting in this industry. This is where I'm pitching myself. and this is what I think I'm worth, and having that conversation, be prepared to do that.
Right.
And another friend of mine, she was in a situation where she may have had to have a pay cut from her employer because her employer was going through some financial difficulties and they offered redundancy or a pay cut. And she did that. She listened to the podcast episode because I told her. I was like, you've got to listen to this. And she listened to the episode and she did the work and she kept her salary at the same stage that it was, and like all the conditions were correct because she understood what her value was and was able to communicate that to her employer. And when she said it in really plain language that, you know, this was what she was going to accept, and if they couldn't meet that, she was going to walk away and find something different. There was no fear from her. She was, you know, she was nervous. She's not that kind of girl that would normally speak up for herself. But you know, she just did it in a very calm, clear way, and they recognised her value. So it's that empowerment. It's that having that awareness, and then going, okay, I'm going to put that into action. And another story. This was another lady that I interviewed on the podcast. Oh, her name escapes me. I'm seeing her face. It will come back to me. But she was talking about superannuation, and she had been in this industry for a long time. She realised that taking time out of the workforce to have children, there was going to be a gap in her super. So she kept making contributions to that. And to the point where her husband's super and her super, she's ahead of her husband's superannuation, even though he's had continuous time in the workforce. And that's just because she was still making those contributions and letting that compound interest work for her. So it's things like that. It's stories like that. It's having the awareness and then taking the action once you know better. So that's the way to overcome those barriers.
Yeah. And, you know, I have a side business, another business, I should say, a few businesses, but a lot of the people in it, it's my anti-aging business, Neora. A lot of the people are women who wanted to stay home with their kids, or were in a job that was not giving them what they needed financially, and so they wanted that side hustle. And it allows them, you know, they're able to just do that and be home with their kids. And then the husbands actually have gotten involved, and so the husbands get to see and raise their kids with their wives. So it's, you know, there are things that you can do. It's just to have the courage to do something different, really.
100%.
I think the next question is important too. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Look, I was just going to go back to it is sort of having that awareness of how bad it can be if you choose not to change, and then making the commitment to change. And even though it may seem really scary, and I love that example of having a side business because I think it is really important. So, you know, putting yourself out there, I found this myself, putting myself out there and saying, oh, this is what I'm doing. It's like, you know, am I going to hear crickets? Are people going to criticize me? Are people going to say, you shouldn't be doing that? But then just being able to overcome that and go, oh, well, actually, I'm leaning into the things that I love. I'm leaning into things that feel right for me. And I've just got to trust that if I keep heading in this direction, unless there's a big sign that's like, this is not good for you, but I've got to trust that if all of the signs are right and people are, you know, saying, well, that's a brilliant idea, I've got to trust that there's something in that. And
Exactly.
And so that's my advice for anybody else. Don't just go inside to, well, what is important for me, and what brings me joy, and then look at, well, how can I monetize that?
So good. Let's talk about the role of financial education. And I love that a lot of the schools that I work with teaching public speaking to kids. And so I work with some of the middle schools, and they teach financial literacy in some of the non-core classes and entrepreneurship. And so I work with them, teaching them pitches and understanding marketing and things like that. And I think it's brilliant because, you know, even if you do go to college, you can do a side gig or do an entrepreneurial effort to pay for the college because you only devote, you know, so many hours rather than just hanging watching Netflix. You could be making your college fund, right?
I 100%. And it makes me think of my daughter. I was having a chat with her yesterday, and she wants to do modeling. And I was saying, look, just take this time now to understand what the industry's like, try and find a role in the industry. So you get into it, you understand it, and then you can see who are the key players that you need to be targeting. And at the same time, she's then able to make some money and sort of put it towards the things that she wants to do as well. I think it's a really important lesson it's an important lesson for all of our young people to have. I'm very motivated to share that message with young girls though, because, we were talking about the systemic barriers. If without that awareness, and I do wish that somebody had told me that, when I was 15.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to know that there are other people that do it, I'm 67 and whenever it was, you stay at home or you get a job in some factory or office and whatnot. And if you didn't go to college, you were thought, well, I guess they're not smart enough. In the meantime, now you see all these people that have chosen, especially after the pandemic, to try this, to give it a shot and to be entrepreneurs. And I think it's great. I also work with a high school group that teaches the kids, the whole senior class talks about investing and financial literacy and being able to start your own business, and how do you look for a good opportunity for joint venturing. All these things, these skills that will help them forever.
Yes. Yeah. And nobody can take that away from them.
No. And it just builds that confidence and that, okay. And I love that they really teach that you don't have to do it alone. That it's a journey that you can take with others, even though it may be your dream, your vision, but you should be able to grow and develop teams and whatnot to help support you. So,
absolutely.
So what are some practical strategies that women can take to implement today to build that strong financial foundation and secure not just immediate cash, but long-term financial freedom? It really.
Look, I do think it comes back to education. Without knowing what you're dealing with, it's really hard. So understanding there's a very sort of special set of conditions and things that are happening at the moment, and then sort of sorry, I'm going to backtrack. I actually would start with looking at what is working in your life financially, and what isn't working in your life financially. And it's easy to look at what's not working and then just go, oh God, it's all terrible. But actually there are, some of us are stronger in some areas, some of us are not as strong in. So really being prepared to do an audit. So, when I think of, what I'd be looking at, it would be, okay, well, how am I doing in terms of just general day-to-day cash flow? How am I doing in terms of my retirement fund? How am I doing in terms of debt? How am I doing in terms of, how financially independent would I be if I separated from my partner today? And then, sort of just looking at all of those different financial areas. How am I doing in terms of getting more money? And do I need to get a side hustle, as we call them, or do I need to negotiate with my boss, and how confident do I feel with that? So yeah, just having that kind of audit in the first place is really important. And then when you know where you are, that's when you can get educated on the areas that are not really working for you. And I'm going to do a plug for my podcast here. It's called Financially Empowered Women. That was really what I wanted to bring, because I'm not an expert in all of these different financial matters. I'm an expert in affordable housing. I'm an expert in investing into affordable housing. But things like superannuation, I'm still learning. Debt management, I'm still learning about that. I found out the other day that there's people that are called money coaches, where you've got your financial advisors, you've got your DIY do it yourself, and then you've got money coaches who are not as you don't have to pay as much as you would do to a financial advisor, but they're there to really help you. And if you're really stuck, you've got debt counselors as well, certainly in Australia anyway. So
in the US too.
Yeah, great. So there's definitely places that you can go to get help, but without doing that audit in the first place, it's hard to know where to go. So what I wanted to create with the Financially Empowered Women podcast is a one-stop shop where there's all of these amazing experts that are talking about really practical steps as to what you can do to be financially independent in these different areas. We've got women from all across the world, super knowledgeable women, beautiful women. My intention with the Financially Empowered Women podcast as well is to make it fun and keep it light, to work together with women, because I think that when women are empowered financially and they can fill their cup financially and way more beyond that, like confidence and with nurturing themselves, knowing that you're looking after yourself now and for the future. And then, there's the beauty of being able to give and the beauty of being able to grow your money and investing into all of these cool projects, which I can talk about as well in terms of, the developer that I mentioned initially that was my business partner for a long time. He created a house for 4 women, which basically each of the women were paying an affordable rent. But because the rent was combined collectively and it was over $1,000 a week, it meant that he, as the developer, was making good money. As an investment property, it was a good return for him. So it was an absolute win-win, and I love that model. I love that co-living model because it gives women dignity, but it also means that they win financially and the investor wins financially as well. So it's not at the expense of. It's in collaboration with, and that's where we need to get to in terms of housing. That's how we will end homelessness. I just wanted to make this whole education journey empowering and fun and collaborative and just really have a movement of women that are like, yeah, this sucks. We're not doing this anymore.
We're going to do something different.
We're going to do something different and we're going to do something together. Yeah.
Well, it's time now for me to go ahead and share my slide that has contact information for Dionne. If you are interested, intrigued, and want to chat with her some more, I will share the information verbally for those that are just listening, but you can get everything when you go to my YouTube channel, Vicki Noethling. So please do subscribe to that, as well as my findyourleadershipconfidence.com in the show notes. All right, so the information is website for Dionne is Women for Homes, and that's the number 4. So womenforhomes.com. On Facebook, it's the same, Women for Homes. LinkedIn is her name, Dionne, that's Dionne, Payn, Payn. Again, Payne is Payn. YouTube is at Financially Empowered Women with initial caps, at Financially Empowered Women. And that is the name of her podcast, Financially Empowered Women. I'm going to turn it over to Dionne. She's going to talk to you about her call to action today, what you can find when you go to her website, as well as where she spends the most time on social media. Dionne?
Yeah, I spend the most time on social media on LinkedIn, and I regularly put out articles and posts which are all about educating and just sharing knowledge. So LinkedIn is a great place to find me, and if you direct message me there, I will always respond. If you feel called to be part of this movement, join me at womenforhomes.com. There's the website there. There's a big join button. And it's free to join. So, if you feel inspired, we would love to have you. Our mission with Women for Homes is to inspire 1 million women to invest $5,000 each to end homelessness by 2030, whilst being financially empowered along the way. So there's, again, it's that win-win scenario where we can help change a big social issue and also make money from doing it at the same time. And I've just found that that is the best way to effect change in life in general. So yeah, if you feel inspired by that, I'd love you to join us. You can head there. And we also have the Financially Empowered Women podcast, which Vicki has read. You can find that on YouTube as well.
Awesome. Dionne, thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom, your heart, and your financial knowledge. I think it was very inspiring and empowering for the audience to be able to learn about what you do and how they might be able to connect with you to help to impact lives of others.
Thank you, Vicki. It's just been such a pleasure to be here, to be sharing this with you, to be sharing this with your audience. And thank you for the opportunity. It's been lovely.
You're very welcome. As always, I remind everyone that life is a journey and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Noethling signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.